Hello, welcome to the Gay Cruise and Travel Podcast with me, just Joey T. It is summer. Summer is in full swing. I'm so glad it's finally warm here in Los Angeles, in the heart of West Hollywood. I think West Hollywood's a little weird because West Hollywood is quite small in terms of square footage, but there are so many different pockets of West Hollywood that have such a different feel. So everybody knows about the bars and clubs and stuff in West Hollywood. Some of them, it's kind of crazy to me sometimes that certain bars in West Hollywood are kind of nationally known. You have places like Mickey's, for example. So there's a big cluster of bars and kind of sort of clubs. There's some clubs that are kind of popping up in that area, and that's a 2 or 3 block stretch. That's on the west side of West Hollywood. You move a little further east, there's this dead zone along Santa Monica Boulevard where a lot of shops have closed down, and it's a little weird. It's there used to be a Starbucks there that used to be really great for people watching, and it was right across the street from a 24-hour fitness, and that was the one that I used to go to. There was a grocery store that opened. I think it was pretty new. It's about 4 or 5 years ago or something like that was open, and there was kind of a bunch of shops. There's a Trader Joe's there that's still there. The Starbucks closed down. And for anyone that lives in West Hollywood, everyone knew about that Starbucks. It was great for people watching. That closed down. That grocery store closed down, and a bunch of shops have just closed down. It's kind of sort of a dead zone. Then you move further east, and then you kind of sort of get some liveliness. There's a bunch of cute little restaurants, and then that's where City Hall is. That's where Hamburger Mary's is. And Hamburger Mary's is always busy on a Saturday and a Sunday. And then you move further and further along, and so it's so weird. And what I've just described, those 3 little pockets of West Hollywood, that's just, I don't know, a mile and a half along Santa Monica Boulevard. Anyways, that's neither here nor there for the Gay Cruise and Travel Podcast. Let's get on to something Gay Cruise and Travel related. So something that hadn't occurred to me as I've been talking about cruises and booking them and what the experience is is that the way cruise lines do things is quite different. And the way that cruise ships have been designed is very different to anything you find anywhere else, okay? And a lot of the times when I talk about there's a new cruise coming, we're gonna go through some of the options for booking different cabins on a cruise, I kind of sort of assume people know about the general types of cabins, the types of rooms that are on these cruise ships. And it recently occurred to me that is not a great assumption to make for some of you out there listening to this podcast. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to talk about some of the types of rooms or cabins, as they're called, on board a cruise ship. At a high level, there's several different categories, so that if you were to take any cruise, not just a gay cruise, not just an Atlantis cruise, maybe you're just going on any kind of cruise ship, basically, the vast majority of cruise ships will have these types of cabins. So let's start from kind of the most basic and least expensive, and then we'll work our way up to the ritzier ones, okay? Very generally, you get 4 types of cabins on most cruise ships. You're gonna have a interior cabin, then you're gonna have a ocean view cabin, then you have a balcony, and then you have suites. So these are kind of the 4 big categories of the types of cabins you're gonna expect to find pretty much on any type of ocean cruise ship. Okay, so think of your Royal Caribbeans, your NCL, Norwegian Cruise Line, all the, any of the larger cruise ships that sail into the ocean, they're all going to have these 4 categories of cabins. So let's start with interior cabins to start. Interior cabin, well, it's pretty easy to describe. It's a room that does not have any sort of view out and it doesn't have any windows, it doesn't have any balconies, no patios. You're just on the interior of the ship. Think of if you're in like, a giant building, like an office building or something like that. Or you live in a house or apartment and you have one of the interior rooms where all the walls are just like solid walls. No windows, no views, no balcony, no anything. And that's basically what an interior room is. And interior rooms tend to be the least expensive type of room that you can book on most cruise ships. And sometimes interior rooms are also a little bit smaller in terms of the square footage. Most rooms anyways will sleep 2 people. Some rooms can sleep 3 or 4 people. We'll talk about kind of occupancy ratings a little bit later on. But yeah, so that's the first type of room that you're going to get. Pros and cons of an interior room. The con is obviously you're not going to get any sort of light coming into the room except for the lights that are in the room itself. So for some people, they might feel a bit claustrophobic in that type of room, given that there's no window, no balcony, no view out into anything outside of the room. And some of the times, those rooms can be smaller than the other types of rooms we're going to talk about later. But for those of you who are not sensitive to a cozier, smaller type of room and don't really care to like look out into the sea, the sky, the ocean, whatever it is, those will be the least expensive ones. And one of the reasons I like interior rooms sometimes is that, especially if I plan on sleeping in, which is pretty much every morning on a vacation, and when I'm on a cruise ship, I'm on vacation, you don't get any sunlight coming in. That can also be a positive. Because if you are going to sleep in and you don't want sunlight peeking through the windows or the balcony doors or anything like that, well, on an interior room, there's no balcony, there's no patio, there are no windows of any sort. So you can sleep in as much as you want, and the room will remain pitch dark for as long as you keep the lights off. So sometimes on an Atlantis cruise, in like a party type situation, if you go to one of the parties one of the nights, the parties go late, obviously. Maybe you don't hit the hay until 4, 5, 6, 7 a.m. And, you've been partying, so you're tired and you want to sleep in. You're on vacation, so you can do whatever you want. So maybe you want to just sleep as much as you want and you don't really care that much about when you're going to wake up. So in an interior room, you never have to worry about the light peeking through the curtains. All the rooms that do have windows and balconies and things like that, yes, they do have blackout curtains, but there's always going to be like on the edge of the curtains or like where the curtains meet, there's always like a little bit of light that comes through. If you're the type of person that don't like to wear an eye mask when you sleep, but sometimes it's uncomfortable, then an interior room is kind of sort of good for that. So I have been in interior rooms before on an Atlantis cruise, and on the times where I've kind of made it like a party cruise, and I kind of go to most of the parties and kind of stay up late a little bit. I've actually really appreciated that I don't have to wear an eye mask, and there's not going to be any chance of any sort of daylight, sunlight, any kind of light coming into the room and waking me up before I actually am ready to get up at like 3 or 4 p.m. or whenever it might be. So yeah, those are some pros and cons of an inside room. Now, because they are less expensive, usually booking an inside cabin is the cheapest way to get onto almost any cruise. They tend to sell out first. They're one of the first types of cabins to sell out. That's also true because there tend to be not a large number of interior cabins on most cruise ships. The balcony rooms we'll talk about later, that's usually the most numerous and popular type of cabin, the way that most cruise ships are designed. And there are not as many interior inside rooms on the deck plans for a lot of cruise ships. So because there's not that many of them to begin with, and a lot of people are just, no frills type of traveler. They just want like the cheapest way to get onto a cruise ship, and they don't really care about the view, all those things like that. A lot of the times, the interior or the inside cabins tend to sell out quite quickly. They're usually one of the first cabin types to sell out. All right, let's talk about the next category, which are the ocean view rooms. As you might have guessed from the name, you'll get a window. Usually you just get the one window. You're not going to get multiple windows. Don't think it's going to be like floor to ceiling windows that's like a whole wall of windows, you're probably just going to get one window. It might be circular, but it's a lot of ships, or depending on which part of the cabin is located on the ship itself. Sometimes you have like a porthole type circular window. Occasionally, you might have like a rectangular window. Sometimes the window might be on like a slant. If you're at like the front or like the back of the ship, away from the sides of the ship, you might, have like one of the walls. The exterior wall of that cabin might be slanted, and that's where they're gonna put like a window in. It's kind of sort of weird but cool at the same time. The window does not open, so it's not like a window at your house. Okay. Windows on ships do not open, not even for like an emergency. If there's an emergency, you're not going out the window, okay? The window does not open. You're going to get one single window. Sometimes, the windows are usually kind of sizable. The smallest one I've seen, it's a circular one that's about 3 feet in diameter. So it's like 3 feet across. I've definitely been in ocean view rooms where the windows were bigger than that. I was in one where the window happened to be rectangular, not circular. And it was like a pretty sizable window. It was probably like 5 feet across and like 4 feet high or something like that. So it really depends, not just on the ship, the design of the ship, but also on the particular cabin itself. You can get a few different types of ocean view cabins. That's actually something that's good to keep in mind. Even within these general categories of cabins, within each of these categories, there will be variations. You'll have smaller rooms, bigger rooms, some that have like smaller balconies or bigger balconies if it does have that feature. Even the interior rooms, the inside cabins I talked about, I said, some of them could be smaller than other rooms in terms of square footage. Some of them is going to be larger. But these are just like the general categories. So keep in mind that there will be variations within these categories. Yeah, but beyond that, again, like I said, anything that has like a window or balcony, you will get like shades. But, it's really nice to be able to just have daylight for a lot of people. Even if they don't plan to spend a ton of time within their cabin, it's still nice to, during the daytime, just have a little bit of daylight, have a little bit of view of the ocean or sometimes something else. When we're talking about these rooms that do have some sort of view into the outside, whether that's a window or a balcony that opens up, anything like that, you're going to sometimes have rooms that have an obscured view. And when you book a room, it's usually important to know that. Sometimes there are rooms, this is true on a lot of ships, there are rooms where the balcony or the window faces like a pillar, a pole, some sort of structural element that's on the exterior of the ship. Maybe it's a lifeboat, okay? Because a lot of these things are like things that are on the outside of the ship. Not every room that has a window or a balcony is just gonna have a fully unobstructed view of the ocean. I think that's what most people think of when they think, oh, I'm gonna book an ocean view room. It's in the name, ocean view. I'm gonna have a view of the ocean. And it doesn't always work like that. So when you book an ocean view room, if you are, a little picky about, even if you're not picky about the view, just know whether the particular room you're booking is going to have an obscured view or not. Most cruise lines will separate out the ocean view rooms where the view is either partially or mostly obstructed, because the cruise lines know that a lot of people, if they're going to book an ocean view room, they want a view of the ocean, and therefore they do actually usually take pains to separate out and indicate the types of ocean view rooms where you're not going to get an unobstructed ocean view. But it's something that you're going to keep in mind if you're interested in an ocean view room. Ocean view rooms, again, because they have to be positioned in certain ways on the different decks, sometimes you get some funky layouts. So I mentioned before, there are some ocean view rooms where the exterior wall of the room is on like a slant, which you may or may not care about that. I think this is like the one room type where you're gonna maybe get the most, it's possible to get some funky type of layouts where maybe it's not a perfectly rectangular room. Maybe one of the walls is like on an angle or like on a slant or something like that. So this room type, maybe more than some of the other ones, is where you might want to ask a few more questions as to, What's the view like? Is it an obstructed view or unobstructed view? Is it a weirdly shaped or angled or laid out room? How big is the room, for example? All right, let's talk about our third category, which again is the most popular and numerous type of room on most cruise ships, and those are the balcony rooms, specifically a ocean balcony, okay? As you might have guessed, you get a balcony, you get balcony doors, patio doors that slide open. You get a glass slider. It's always glass and there's always a slider. Slider open. You have your own private balcony you can step into. Most of the time, you will have ocean, okay? When you look up Google photos of what a typical cruise ship room looks like, you're probably going to see a ocean balcony room. That's probably the type of image that pops up. It's the one that looks maybe like the nicest in marketing materials for a lot of cruise lines and travel agencies. It's nice sometimes to have that extra space, especially if you're gonna have quite a few people in the room. Usually most rooms, it's assumed that there's gonna be 2 people in the room, or what we usually call double occupancy. And this also is the assumption that's made when you see the list price for most rooms on most cruises. In the fine print, it says that, but I'm telling you now, most prices for most cruises assume double occupancy. What does that mean? What that means is the price that you see is the per person price if you put 2 people into that room. That is what is meant by a double occupancy rate. Okay. In terms of the room itself, these rooms tend to be a little bit bigger than the previous room types. Again, like the interior, inside cabins, some of them are quite small. Even the biggest interior cabins, inside cabins tend to be smaller than the smallest balcony rooms. If you're gonna have 2 people, I think sometimes some inside cabins for 2 people, it's like an okay fit as long as you're not heavy packers. There are a lot of balcony rooms actually that would fit 3 or even 4 people. Sometimes you have a couch that is a sofa bed that pulls out. Sometimes you actually get a bed that folds down from the wall in some of the rooms that can sleep like 4 people. It only sleeps 1 person. It's a narrow bed. You're never gonna fit 2 people in there. And when you fold it up, it's kind of sort of like semi-flush against the wall. It doesn't look super sturdy at a glance, but you can sleep someone in there. I have had friends stay in that type of a room before. But yeah, the balcony rooms are a little bit bigger, and those are the types of rooms you can fit like a 3rd person and a 4th person in there beyond the standard double occupancy. You do have to pay extra to add a 3rd person or to add the 4th person in there, but it's not going to be as expensive if only 2 people were sharing the room, if you were to just divide everything equally. So one cool thing about the balconies on most cruise ships, when you step onto the balcony, you have your private balcony. So you have dividers on either side of your balcony that separates your balcony from the balconies of your immediate neighbors. On most cruise ships, those dividers can be unlocked. So if you're traveling with a group of people, okay, let's say you've booked 3 adjacent rooms. Your travel group have booked 3 rooms, 3 ocean balcony rooms that are all right beside each other. On most cruise ships, you're gonna have the cabin attendant actually unlock those balcony dividers that would be dividing the 3 balconies in your travel group. And then now you have one massive balcony. So me and my friends have done bookings before where we were able to book adjacent ocean balcony rooms. We've taken advantage of that if it's available on that cruise ship to have the cabin attendant. You need like a special key that only the crew have. You can't just unlock it yourself. And then they've kind of retracted those balcony dividers. So between like the however many of us that have X number of rooms, we just have like one giant balcony. The thing about that is, if your friends, if you have nosy people in your travel group, maybe you don't want to do that because those exterior balcony doors, they don't have locks. So like you can open it or you can close it. You can latch it, but there's not like a lock. So even if you close it from the inside, if you have someone on the outside, they can unlock, they just turn the handle and it opens. Okay. And a lot of people don't tend to close the curtains on their ocean balconies because it's just like the ocean, right? It's not like there's a neighbor across the way from you. It's just the ocean. So people just tend to leave it open. One of the reasons you're buying an ocean balcony room, you're paying the extra money for it, is to have a view of the ocean and have that daylight. So most of the time, most people just leave it wide open unless they're sleeping. So if someone else in your friend group, if you retract those balcony dividers, they can just pop over, basically walk to where your balcony door is and just like look right inside. God knows what you're doing, okay? So that's just something to think, to keep in mind. I mean, if you're traveling with friends, it's probably okay because they're like your friends. But if you have some like nosy friends in your group and you might be like, I don't know, getting it on in your whatever, and you're not always keeping in mind that, oh, we've like taken down the balcony dividers between all the rooms. And an easy way for your friends to visit your room is not to go out into the hallway and knock on your door. They'll just go down the balcony to your room and they'll just be standing outside your, full glass patio door or whatever. So me and my friends have done that. And there have been some like funny stories, like someone walked, like someone was having sex, like a hookup or something, and then one of their friends in one of the adjacent rooms, like, was just gonna like drop by or to hang or do whatever, and they walk and it's just like the curtains are wide open, and it's just like, oh, they were getting a show that they were not expecting. Anyways, yeah, so balcony rooms are kind of sort of like the standard room that most people think of when you think of booking some sort of cabin on a cruise ship. Now, those three categories, the inside, the ocean view, and the balcony, that encompasses 90% of the rooms on most cruise ships. The fourth category, which is special, are the suites. Maybe that's a topic that, I'm not going to dig super detailed into the suites for two reasons, because one is only like 5 or 10% of a cruise ship usually. And the second thing is, suites really depend, like the design, the layout, and the feature and the size of the suites really depends on the cruise line and on the specific cruise ships. So someone like Royal Caribbean, one of the biggest cruise lines in the world, they have lots of different ships, okay? Across all those many different ships, they have many different sizes and designs of ships. It's like going to a Toyota dealership and it's like they sell 50 different models, okay? You can get like a tiny little Corolla, or you can get like a massive pickup truck from Toyota, okay? And they're all a little bit different. Between all these different types of cruise ships that they have, like an inside cabin or an ocean view cabin or a balcony cabin, between almost every ship that Royal Caribbean has, at a high level, it's pretty similar. A ocean balcony room on one ship is going to be pretty similar to an ocean balcony room on another ship. Even though one ship might be like half the size of the other or be like 10 years older than the other one. Like those types of rooms are like kind of sort of cookie cutter in a lot of ways. And when it comes to suites, it's not quite the same. Some suites can get quite fancy, especially on the larger, fancier, newer ships. Some of them resemble almost like a townhouse. It'll be like 2 levels. Some of them might even have like a grand piano inside. They usually have multiple bedrooms. Some of them have like giant private balconies. Like the balconies is the size of like 3 or 4 or 5 interior cabins somewhere else on that ship. Some of them might have a private little jacuzzi or a hot tub. So it really, really depends on the specific ship and also the cruise line. Some cruise lines are more premium and more luxury than others, and they will have more suites or like nicer suites. So I'm not going to dig too much into suites, but just know that if you want something fancier and you have the money, hey, the cruise lines will take your money. They will sell you a suite. Now, I did say on most cruise ships, suites are only maybe like 5-ish%. That's like a rough guesstimate, like 5-ish% of the number of rooms that are on a ship. 5 to 10%. It depends on there's a lot of variables there. And with Atlantis, for example, they have a completely different booking process to get a suite. For an ocean view room, a balcony room, an inside cabin on most Atlantis cruises, you can kind of just book it right away. You can work with a travel agent. They'll be able to like tap some buttons on the computer and be like, oh, okay, I booked you this room. Or like you can go onto the Atlantis website yourself. They have a self-reservation system. You can look at which rooms are available, all the different types of rooms, and you just book it right on the spot there. It takes like maybe a few minutes. For the suites, though, on the Atlantis cruise, you have to submit a special form that's separate, that's specific to suites, to request to book a suite. Okay, and then they have a priority system for all those requests. People that have sailed with Atlantis like 30, 40, 50 times before, kind of one of their alumni, they will get more priority than someone who has never sailed with Atlantis, for example, even though they might be like completely loaded with money. So suites, especially on Atlantis, the way those are booked are going to be a little bit different. So those are the 4 types of cruises. And I also talked a little bit about the pros and cons of each. And I also talked about the double occupancy. And also you can add like 3rd or 4th people to some of the rooms, mainly like the balcony rooms, you can add people. The suites, some of them are massive. And obviously some of those have multiple bedrooms. You can obviously more than 2 people in those. A lot of you listening are solo travelers. I know that, because I get questions and comments from prospective solo cruisers all the time. And there are some sailings where there are single occupancy rates, and some cruise ships have rooms that are physically designed for solo travelers. They are few and far in between. I can't say that most cruise ships have rooms that are physically designed for solo travelers, and not every cruise line and not every cruise ship will have or offer single occupancy rates. Right, so I explain what double occupancy rates are. Single occupancy rates or solo rates obviously are the price that you see that is advertised for those solo rates or for single occupancy. It just assumes you're the only one staying in that room. Something that you might want to keep in mind, though, if you are a solo traveler and you're looking at a particular cruise and you do see some single occupancy rates or rooms listed for that particular cruise, a lot of the times those rooms are quite small. Okay, we talked about the inside cabins, even the ones that are double occupancy inside cabins being smaller than the other room types, like the ocean view rooms and the balcony rooms. When you have a room that is physically designed for just a single person, those could very well end up being the smallest rooms that exist on that particular cruise ship. So again, if you don't mind something nice and cozy, I think that's okay. A lot of the times when Atlantis or even just the cruise line themselves, when they list out all the different types of rooms they have on a ship or for a sailing, you will usually see the square footage listed there, and that gives you a good indicator of how big that room is. The other thing is the beds are going to be smaller. Okay, every room that has some sort of double occupancy rate, that's not a solo rate and not a solo room, usually they'll have at least a queen size bed. Oftentimes it's more like a king size, or they basically have a 2 kind of twin size bed that are pushed together that can form one giant bed, kind of sort of roughly a king size bed. Or if the people that are going to be sleeping in that room don't want to share a single bed, it's quite easy for the cabin attendants to kind of separate out the twin beds so that you have like 2 individual beds. So like I just traveled with my friend David on the Allure cruise of Atlantis this past February. And that's what we did. When we first got to the room, it was just like one giant kind of king size bed. We had our cabin attendant just split the bed, so we kind of got 2 like twin size beds. When you have a solo room, you're not going to get like a king size bed to yourself. You're going to some of them, you're going to get maybe like just a twin size bed. So if you're the type of person that don't like to be in like a twin size bed, you want something that's like a little bit bigger, at least like a queen size bed, the solo cabins might not be for you. Yeah, and again, it really depends on the ship. Some of the ships, especially some of the older ones, they just don't have a lot of rooms designed for solo travelers. And some cruise lines that are more family orientated, like Royal Caribbean, for example, it's most of the ships were designed with families in mind, not as much for solo travelers. Whereas Virgin Voyages, for example, they tend to have some of the nicer, better, more numerous solo rooms on most of their cruise ships because it's an adult-only cruise line. It wasn't designed for families with kids to come on board. And they know that, for the market that they're targeting, there's going to be more of that demographic that would want to have a solo room. So on their ships, they have some of the nicer solo rooms that I've seen, at least in terms of the ships and cruise lines that Atlantis tends to charter these days anyways. And finally, I'm going to throw in a little, some bonuses is in regular hotels, sometimes you can get connecting rooms, which is basically you have two regular rooms that are beside each other. And then in the wall that the two rooms share, you have a door that can be unlocked by like the hotel staff. So that's a feature that you find in quite a lot of hotels. And you have that on some of the rooms on a lot of cruise ships as well. If you're to look in the deck plan, sometimes you get like a little arrow or a little marker that says which two pairs of adjacent rooms are connecting rooms. And again, that means the wall that divides those two adjacent rooms, somewhere along that wall, there'll be a door that can be unlocked only by the crew staff. You know, you can't just have like your neighbor randomly unlock the door and like jump in and say hello. But yeah, if you are, again, traveling with a group of people and you are getting adjacent rooms, usually this applies to ocean balcony rooms. That's the type of room where you're most likely going to be able to find connecting rooms. And not every room, not every adjacent ocean balcony room is going to have that connecting door. So if that's a feature that's of interest to you, you're going to have to look pretty carefully on the deck plans, or just, work with a travel agent, who can just look for those types of rooms for you. But then when you get on board, you can have the cabin attendant unlock that door for you, just like they can unlock and retract those balcony dividers I was talking about before, in case you do want to have that interior access to your neighbors if you guys are traveling together. All right, so that is a little overview of all the different types of cabins on a cruise ship. Yeah, I got a couple of people send me some comments on this. I was like, to me, because I've been on so many cruises and I talk about cruises all the time, and I thought like, yeah, an inside room does have windows, and the ocean view obviously has a window, and a balcony room has a balcony, that I just kind of sort of take it for granted in my head that like, it's so obvious, right? But, it's not. Sometimes when you're really experienced or knowledgeable about something, when you're not a beginner or you're not new to something anymore, sometimes you make a lot of dangerous assumptions and you take some things for granted. So I'm actually kind of thankful that a couple of people just reached out to be like, hey, Joey, what are like the different types of rooms on a cruise ship? Like I'm looking at maybe booking a cruise, but there's like 20 different types of rooms. Like, what is going on? A lot of hotels, for example, they have maybe like 4 or 5 different types of rooms. Maybe a really bigger fancy one may have like 6 or 7. But even on a modest-sized cruise ship, when you go on the Atlantis website, for example, and just look at the price list where they list all the different types of rooms and the prices for any one of the cruises, it's a list of like 50 different rooms. Or it's like, even like it starts with the suites at the top, and there's like 50 different types of suites. Then you get to the balcony room section, and there's like 6 or 8 different types of balcony rooms. It's like, for the average person, I can totally see how it's quite confusing. And for a newcomer to parse through that list of like potentially 30, 40, 50 different types of rooms and not really know the lingo about, how ships are laid out and the different cabin types, it could be quite overwhelming. So I'm actually glad I got that feedback, and I was able to explain to you today some of the different types of rooms that there are on cruise ships. Do you have a question about cruises? Doesn't it have to be about gay cruises? Doesn't be about Atlantis cruises? Just maybe about cruising in general? Feel free to comment down in the YouTube section of any of my YouTube videos. No matter what video you put your comment on, it will come up in my little dashboard. YouTube has a little dashboard for content creators where no matter what video comments are made under, it will just pop up in this one nice dashboard. And hey, who knows? I might answer your comments or questions there directly in a reply, or I might even make it a topic of a future video or podcast episode like I did today. Again, if you'd like to support me, Below every single YouTube video I have on my YouTube channel, Just Joey T, if you click on the little three dots besides the like button, it'll pop up some more options, and there is a thanks button there, where if you were so generous to support me with a little tip, you can tip me right from within YouTube. And I also have an app called Buy Me a Coffee, which is an app that creators have to allow their fans to leave them a little tip so they can buy a coffee. So there you go. Thank you so much for listening, and I will not see you next time, but I will talk and lecture to you. Sometimes I talk and it's like, I know a lot of you are listening, but it's a little weird sometimes, even after doing so many episodes, to just be trying to have a conversation with someone, but like it's just me in my house and a camera and a microphone. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you next time. Bye, y'all.